Okay. So Tamils have long faced discrimination in the educational, political, and financial systems in Sri Lanka. And Tamil women do face the dual edged sword of an oppressive patriarchy in a country with very long standing and deep rooted divisions in caste, in sex, race, and fundamentally in language. Tamil is one of the oldest languages to exist, and and our very language and culture is at risk of extinction in Gotabaya Rajapaksa's Sri Lanka. There's been little progress since the 1978 constitution declaring Sinhala as the only official language of the state. And after the deliberate torching of the Jaffna Public Library with over 97,000 irreplaceable Tamil manuscripts and books by an organised Sinhala mob, this is one of the most violent examples of ethnic biblioclism of the 20th century. Now, Sunday the 8th of March coming up is International Women's Day. And outside of recruiting women to frontline positions during Sri Lanka's 26-year war, whereby you had women from all castes having a rare opportunity for equal expression, Sri Lanka's political divisions have targeted our vulnerable sex and still do to this date. So prominent LTTE front woman Isapriya was brutally raped and murdered by Kamal Gunaratne's troops in May 2009, and this is very clearly captured on video. There's still been no liability to this date, and Gunaratne now sits as a newly elected Defence Secretary in Gotabaya Rajapaksa's Sri Lanka. Concerns do continue to exist with similar violations of human rights of the thousands of women who are lacking her media profile for visibility. Violations which have been perpetrated by the country's armed militias and continue to be perpetrated. So they are fundamentally an expression of discrimination against a whole people, part of an ongoing strategy of war, and in its very gender-based nature as part of a structural relationship of domination and subjugation, which is based entirely on racism. It is the weakest section of the population that has suffered the most, and 90% of the war victims were Tamil civilians. The majority were women and children. Moreover, thousands of women have been made widows, most in their early 20s, who, with or without small children, have been driven into destitution and left to fend for themselves in a countryside that is ruined under continuous threats of indiscriminate harassment and rape by the armed forces and their militias. You still have unequal access to Tamil-focused languages in schools, universities and scholarship, and makes educational advancement still near impossible in a culture of deep-rooted patriarchy. And I appeal to High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet as not only a woman but humanitarian of the United Nations human rights body to cease trade and government alliances with Rajapaksa Sri Lanka, especially in the wake of the country's failure to honour its long overdue obligations to co-sponsorship of resolutions 30/1, 34/1 and 40/1. Sri Lanka's Tamils have waited long enough, and we have had enough delay. Sri Lanka and its new president have to be tried in the International Criminal Court for War Crimes against the country's traditionally most vulnerable, which is Tamil women. And the slight with the recent country's withdrawal of the co-sponsorship of resolutions 30/1 and 40/1 absolutely must not be ignored. Now, the High Commissioner has expressed her regrets, but there needs to be more than that, and the only forward step I see with finding liability for Sri Lanka and any form of formal retribution is to impose sanction. Now, Sri Lanka is heavily reliant on trade with both the United States and the EU. United States has already banned accused war criminal Lieutenant Shavendra Silva and his family from entering the United States. And this, I think, is a very progressive step. But the European Union needs to do the same, and the withdrawal of co-sponsorship can't be ignored, and must impose economic sanctions on Sri Lanka and cease trade with Sri Lanka until Sri Lanka agrees to a hybrid international independent investigation into war crimes. Having Sri Lanka investigate its own government for war crimes is ludicrous. So I see a swing in the pendulum in terms of women's rights in Sri Lanka with the advent of rising brown and black and Asian women's movement, MIA, Malala Yousaf. The wave of a new generation of powerful Tamil feminists is rising. And this isn't a platform outside of combat, and collectively we have enormous strength, and I predict we'll be the ones to frontline the call to justice for generations of our lost Tamil brethren. Okay, thank you.